Room 214 had a pulse of its own. Not the kind that beeped from monitors or echoed in heartbeats, but something deeper, older. It was buried at the farthest end of Holbrook Memorial's west wing, past flickering lights and long-abandoned wheelchairs, where the snow leaned heavy against the windows and silence felt like a second skin. No one liked going down that hallway. The nurses spoke of the cold. The janitor refused to clean it after dark. Doctors rarely assigned patients there, and when they did, it was out of desperation, not hope. But when Era Quinn arrived, pale, feverish, unresponsive, there were no rooms left. The hospital was full, overflowing with winter-borne infections and icy road accidents. Room 214 was the only space available. "She won't know the difference," a nurse muttered, wheeling the child in. "She's barely even there." Her mother, Mara, followed in a daze. She hadn't slept in days. Every breath Era took, shallow and uneven, echoed like a ticking clock. Doctors hadn't named what was wrong, only that her condition was progressively deteriorating. No fever, no trauma, just a slow fading, a drifting away. Room 214 greeted them with a blast of unnatural cold. The overhead light buzzed twice before dimming to a sickly yellow. The air felt thick, old, and heavy with silence. Mara said nothing. She clutched Era's tiny hand and sat beside her bed, beginning the only ritual that made sense anymore. Inhale. Exhale. Free. Counting her daughter's breaths kept her sane. If the number stopped, it meant something she couldn't say out loud. No one stayed longer than they had to. The nurses changed shifts early. The doctors came in pairs. Even the machines seemed reluctant to operate normally in 214, beeping irregularly, flashing random codes. On the third day, the lights dimmed without warning. The snow outside had turned to sleet, lashing at the windows like claws. Mara barely noticed. She was too deep in her rhythm. Watery. Then a sound. Soft, steady. Tap, tap, tap. Something padded down the hallway. Not footsteps, lighter, sharper. Mara looked up. A black and white German shepherd stood at the door, tongue lolling, fur damp from snow. No collar, no tags, no leash. Just those strange, knowing eyes that locked directly with hers. "Toby," she whispered. The name slipped out unbidden. Her childhood dog. Long gone. But those eyes. The nurses arrived seconds later, wide-eyed. Where did that dog come from? No one's brought in an animal. He walked past the main desk. Just walked in. They tried to remove him. He growled once, low and warning, and the lights flickered out completely. The dog padded over to Era's bed, circled once, and laid down with a sigh so human it chilled Mara's spine. Room 214 seemed quieter now. Warmer. Just slightly. The monitors steadied. The numbers evened out. And Era moved. Just a flicker. Her fingers curled slightly toward the dog. They named him Orion. It was a young nurse, Kelsey, who noticed it first. The white patch of fur on his chest, shaped like a crooked star. "Like the constellation," she whispered, though no one could explain why it felt so appropriate. Maybe because he didn't feel like a normal dog. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He just watched. Dr. Hale, the attending physician, wasn't pleased. "There are rules," he said sharply. "No animals in critical care areas. Period." "We tried," the charge nurse replied, voice tight with confusion. "He won't leave. Every time we take him out, something goes wrong. Power flickers. Doors jam. One of the 4 machines crashed when we locked him out for 2 minutes." Dr. Hale narrowed his eyes and peered into room 214. Orion sat perfectly still at the foot of Era's bed. Era, still frail and silent, now had a little more color in her cheeks. Her fingers occasionally twitched, as if she were dreaming. Maybe reaching. Mara hadn't moved much either. She watched the dog as if she were staring into some half-forgotten dream. Every time someone came to remove him, she spoke softly but firmly. "He stays." Orion brought something to the room. It wasn't just warmth, it was stillness, like the room itself took a breath when he entered. The cold eased, the air settled. A soft hum replaced the oppressive silence. Then one evening, the room changed again. It started with the lights. They dimmed gradually, one by one, until the only glow came from the monitoring screens. Mara looked up from her breath counting and saw it. Movement in the far corner. Not from Orion. He was alert now, ears pricked, body tense. No, this was something else. A patch of shadow in the upper corner began to stretch, just slightly, toward the bed. There was no shape, no body, just a darker kind of dark, curling inwards, quiet and patient. Orion growled, low and deep. The sound reverberated through the floor and into Mara's spine. She gripped the sides of her chair, unsure if she was dreaming or descending into some sleep-deprived delirium. Then Era stirred. Her eyes didn't open, but her lips moved. Just barely. A sound came from her throat, dry, cracked, and almost whispered. It wasn't English. The nurse on duty rushed to the doorway, but froze when she heard it too. The word Era spoke didn't belong in this world. It vibrated through the walls like a tremor. The temperature dropped instantly. Orion stood and faced the shadowed corner. His body arched, tail low, and his teeth bared. He was guarding her. Dr. Hale reviewed the security footage later. There was nothing visible. No shadow, no movement. Only the exact moment the lights dimmed and every monitor spiked erratically. Era's vitals surged, then stabilized again. She spoke, Mara said quietly. To what? The doctor asked. Mara didn't answer, because in her heart she already knew. Something had come, and something was waiting. The word lingered in the room like smoke. No one could recall exactly what Era had said, but the sound of it stayed with them, dry, ancient, like wind sliding over forgotten tombs. The shadow in the corner hadn't moved again, but it hadn't gone either. It waited. Orion hadn't left Era's side since. At night, he faced the corner, muscles tight, eyes locked on the shifting dark. During the day, he rested, until the flicker returned in the lights, and with it the cold. Mara stopped counting breaths. Not because they didn't matter, but because something else now filled her attention. The invisible tug-of-war happening in the room. She didn't understand it. Not fully, but she knew it had to do with Orion, and that corner, and the name Era had whispered. She spent hours trying to pronounce it herself. Each time it caught in her throat like thorns. Late one night, when snow erased even the outlines of trees outside, Mara heard it again. A rustle. Not from the window or hallway, but from within the very walls. She sat up. Orion already stood. His gaze bore into the dark corner. And then Era's lips parted once more. She didn't whisper this time. She spoke. Louder. Her. And the moment she did, every machine in the room flatlined for half a second. Mara shot to her feet. Era. But her daughter didn't open her eyes. Instead, her mouth kept moving, repeating the same strange syllables with a rhythm that sounded disturbingly familiar. Like an invocation. The shadow began to stretch. Not slowly this time. It slithered across the ceiling, down the wall like thick black fog. Orion barked. A thunderous, savage sound that made Mara jump. His body arched forward, legs tense, tail rigid. He snapped at the air between Era and the creeping shadow. Then the lights exploded. Glass burst from the overhead fixture, raining sparks and shards onto the tile. The machine screamed with overlapping alarms. Era began to convulse, back arching off the bed, mouth frozen mid-word. Mara rushed forward, grabbing her daughter's arms, sobbing her name. Orion lunged. His body collided with the air in front of the bed. But it was more than just air. A sudden gust of icy wind whipped through the room, as if something invisible had been hit. The sound it made wasn't a bark. It was a growl wrapped in something almost like a chant. Something howled in return, but not Orion. Something else. Something unseen. And then, silence. The lights flickered back on. The shadow was gone. The cold retreated. Era collapsed back into the sheets, eyes fluttering. Her chest rose. Once, twice. Smooth, natural. Then slowly, her eyes opened. Just a sliver. And for the first time in weeks, she blinked. Orion sat at her side, panting, bleeding from a cut that hadn't been there before. Mara fell to her knees, weeping. "Era," she whispered. Her daughter's lips trembled. "Mommy," came the voice. Soft, real, and awake. They transferred Era to a warmer room the next morning. Not because she needed it, but because no one dared keep her in 214 any longer. The hallway outside remained empty. No one spoke of the night before. No incident report. No official logs. Just a quiet understanding that something had happened. Something not medical. Orion followed the gurney as if it were his duty. No leash. No command. Just presence. Dr. Hale met Mara outside the new room. He was holding a thin, worn manila folder. "This was buried in the archives," he said. "No digital record. It was filed under a different wing name. West Annex." He handed it to her. "Look at the last page." The folder trembled in her hands as she flipped through outdated documents. Patient notes, handwritten charts, and finally, a photograph, sepia-toned, crinkled at the corners. A young girl, no older than Era, stood smiling weakly in a hospital bed. Beside her sat a black and white German shepherd, nearly identical to Orion. The date read, August 1952. Mara's voice caught. "Is this? We thought it was a coincidence too," Dr. Hale murmured. "Until we found two more cases. 1978, 1989, all in room 214. All children. All unexplainable recoveries. And the dog." He exhaled slowly. "In every case, same markings, same breed, same star on the chest." Mara looked through the hallway window. Orion sat patiently beside Era's bed, watching her with those impossible, ancient eyes. "Why hasn't anyone said anything?" "Because the ones who do," he said grimly, "don't stay long in this hospital. People don't want miracles, not ones they can't explain." Era's recovery was nothing short of astonishing. Within days, she was speaking in full sentences. Her muscles, once locked in stillness, began regaining strength. She laughed, quietly at first, then louder. Mara cried more than once, each tear an echo of the nights she'd whispered goodbye. But something else lingered. One evening, Era called out as Mara was fluffing her pillow. "The shadow doesn't like Orion." Mara froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Her daughter tilted her head. "It's still in that room. The corner. It's angry." Mara forced a smile. "It's gone now. You're safe." Era shook her head. "No, he keeps it away. But it watches." She pointed toward the window, toward nothing in particular. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "The voice." Mara tried to dismiss it, but the dread returned like a tide. She remembered the language Era had spoken, the crash, the howl, and Orion's blood on the floor. That night, she dreamt of flickering lights, of whispers crawling beneath the walls. And in the dream, room 214 stood open, waiting. The last days at Hallbrook Memorial felt like a slow exhale. Era was well enough to leave the hospital. She smiled again, a bright, full smile that warmed the hearts of everyone who passed her room. Orion remained ever watchful, as if he were tethered to her, unwilling to leave her side. No one questioned his presence anymore. Nurses, doctors, Even the skeptical ones had begun to nod in agreement. Something had changed in that room. Something beyond science, beyond reason. But still, the shadow lingered. Not in the corners of the room, but in Mara's mind. The memory of those whispered words Era had spoken. The strange sensation of being watched gnawed at her. It didn't help when she found the second photograph, tucked behind the folder. This one much older, from the 1920s. It was the same German shepherd, the same young girl, sitting weakly in a hospital bed, smiling faintly. But this time, the name written on the back of the photo was different. Orion, guardian of room 214. Mara couldn't shake it. The same guardian, reappearing again and again, year after year, century after century. And always in room 214, always at the darkest hour. The night before their release, Mara stood by the window, watching the last of the snow melt in the dimming light. She felt Orion's presence behind her, unwavering. She had grown to trust him, more than any living creature. The room felt different now. Not just warmer, not just quieter, but safe. There was no shadow creeping along the walls, no flicker of lights, just the steady sound of Era's laughter from the other room, her little voice high and bright as she played with her toys. Era's condition had stabilized. She would go home, but Mara knew something was changing within her daughter. Something that had been awakened, a strength that lay just beneath the surface, tied to something older than the hospital, older than time itself. It wasn't just Orion's protection. It was something that bound them all. Something that connected the child, the dog, and the room. A force beyond understanding, guarding them from forces they could not see. Mara turned as Orion approached, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "You're not just a dog, are you?" she whispered. The question, though unspoken for weeks, finally escaped her lips. She didn't expect an answer, but Orion sat still, his gaze softening just slightly. He didn't need to speak. The clock on the wall ticked. Suddenly, a soft whisper filled the air, so faint Mara almost missed it. It was a voice, a distant echo, so old it felt like it had been forgotten for centuries. The words were clear, though they were in a language she didn't understand. And yet somehow she knew. It was the promise of a guardian. Orion turned, as if hearing the same thing. His body relaxed. Then, slowly, he padded toward the door. Mara stepped aside. As the door creaked open, Orion glanced back at her one last time. Then, he disappeared into the hallway, vanishing into the shadows of the long, abandoned corridor. And Mara, with her daughter safe in her arms, understood. Room 214 was no longer a place of death. It was a place of second chances. And somewhere, beyond time and reason, Orion's vow remained.